Hello, everyone, and of course, welcome back. And it is time for Astrology in the News for April 2nd, 2018. Hope everybody had a great Passover and Easter. So, of course, we always begin with yogic wisdom of the day. What could yoga teach us today that's so brilliant? Yoga begins right where I am, not where I was yesterday or where I long to be. Brought to you by Linda Sparrow. Don't yoga and drive. So yeah, not where you were. Just don't yoga and drive. It's not a good idea. Okay. So anyway, I looked at the news today and I see Macron is calling for tech giants to be dismantled. So he wants Trump to go after them with all the anti-fervor, and of course Trump is going after Amazon, which I don't think has that big of a presence in Europe, but Facebook and Google definitely do. Or do it, or we'll sell ourselves to you. So Google's probably going to end up buying France or Facebook or something like that, because you know how the French, how they fight. They fight in reverse. They keep running. Anyway, so this is Macrone's chart. So taking a look at Macron, let's see, don't have his dashes up here, but he actually has, one of the interesting things here is that he was affected by the eclipse. So you see he has his retrograde Saturn around 6 degrees of Leo, and this is let's see, this is conjunct the fixed star Regulus. And when Saturn gets conjunct Regulus, it actually has a very interesting effect. Normally, Saturn in the sign of Leo is very difficult, but when Saturn is conjunct Regulus, it gives somebody the ability to be a leader, but sometimes they feel uncomfortable in a position of leadership. So Leo is a sign of leadership, but Saturn is actually an enemy planet of the sun, and the sun rules Leo. So when somebody has Saturn in Leo, they may be forced to take now he wasn't forced to take a position of leadership, but they end up being in a position of leadership, but sometimes they feel very uncomfortable with that position. Let's see other things that he has. Let's see, retro Mercury and Sun conjunct here. Do have a birth time, so he is a Capricorn ascendant. Capricorns do fairly well in government. Let's see, Venus and Neptune here are conjunct in Scorpio. I don't know, that could usually mean well, let's see, that's in the 11th house. So actually, that's not really bad. But when Venus and Neptune are conjunct, that could be a little bit difficult for relationships. So we'll have to keep an eye on his marriages. Now, here, this is really interesting. He has a debilitated Mars in the sign of Cancer here. But when Mars is retrograde, it has what's called a niche bang effect. And what niche bang means is it means let's see, it's a cancellation of debilitation, roughly in Sanskrit. Another thing that's very interesting is his Jupiter is almost exactly opposite his sun. And I just learned today that when a planet is opposite the sun, most of the times it's going to be retrograde. I'm trying to think of an exception to that. But here we can see that the sun and Jupiter are opposite each other. So he has the sun in the sign of Sagittarius, and its ruler is retrograde in the sign of Gemini. So this is kind of like a mutual reception thing. So it's actually not too bad of mutual reception. But oh wait, Jupiter and Mercury. I'm sorry, Jupiter and Mercury are in mutual reception and mutual aspects. So that's interesting. So you have Mercury in Jupiter's sign and Jupiter in Mercury's sign, and they're both retrograde. And this is also the 6th and 12th house, which is a switching of Dushtana lords, which means the lord of a house that's not necessarily benefic. And this actually seemed to work out quite well. And this is a very good example of how something could go well if you have, like, well, if you have difficult planetary placement. So when Jupiter and Mercury switch signs, I think when two negative houses switch signs, it can actually like two negatives equal a positive, and you see that a lot in Vedic astrology. Let's see, moving on. Erdogan shakes his fist at Israel over protests, and of course, in response, Israel flips him the bird or the penguin. A penguin's a bird, right? See there, he's all like. Anyway, so taking a look at Erdogan's chart. Now, the interesting thing here that I see is that he entered into his Mars Dasha, let's see, that's about 2 years ago. And so Mars Dasha can be very violent in general. And look at him. He has his Mars. His Mars is exactly conjunct his moon in the sign of Scorpio. Is this conjunct the, let's see, Rigel, Castor. Oh, he's, okay, also, okay, so this is really interesting. This guy's got some very fascinating planetary conjunctions. So he has Rigel and Pollux, the Gemini twins, both activated. So K2 is conjunct Pollux, and Rigel is Uranus is conjunct Castor. And so this is very interesting. I've actually never seen this before on a chart. So, it's this dynamic of the twins. So this is actually in his seventh house. We actually have a birth time for Erdogan, so that's cool. This is actually in his seventh house here, and that's the house of partnerships and relationships and things like that. So it's very interesting. So for him, I think he probably puts a lot of effort into relationships, and if he doesn't get what he wants, having K2 there conjunct Pollux, he probably gets a little combative. Okay, and then Mars and Moon. Now these, even though it says here that the Moon is conjunct Antares, so is Mars. This makes for a very warlike, fighting type personality. So this is actually kind of irksome. Now, what's really fascinating about this is I think when they were having all those troubles in Turkey, I have to go back and double check the calendar, but something that happened in his chart in 2016 around August is that retrograde Saturn and retrograde Mars all came into conjunct his natal Mars and his moon. Actually, that's pretty amazing. He wasn't disposed during this time. So I think that's roughly about the same time as the coup. I'm not quite sure on the timing of that, but that's fascinating. So you can actually see all this stuff actually coming out in the chart. Then, of course, Venus, the Sun, and Mercury all in the sign here of Aquarius. This is in the third house. This is actually a man of the people. Venus and Mercury and the Sun on the sign of Aquarius also actually, believe it or not, makes somebody inclined to science. Now, the other really powerful placement is he has his Jupiter conjunct Rigel. So in Jupiter, it does okay in Taurus. That's not the best placement for it. Actually, I take that back. Jupiter is actually enemies with Venus, and Venus rules Taurus. So Jupiter and Taurus doesn't necessarily do well, but Jupiter conjunct Rigel is very good for money and wealth. So this guy is not going to be short any money for lack of trying, that's for sure. Moving on, Trump shakes his fist at Bezos. Well, we're going with the fist shaking. Bezos didn't even get out of bed because he's just like, meh, who cares, right? I'm not really detecting that Bezos is too very scared of Trump, but I wanted to use this for the Trumpdate. So right now, what we are looking at right now is a transit. This is actually a transit chart of Donald Trump. So let's see. On the outside, we have Donald Trump, and on the inside, we actually have the stars that are going or the transit as the stars were going. I think this was I pulled this at about 3 o'clock this afternoon in Washington. So what's going on with Donald Trump? Well, a lot of people are pinning their hopes. So I'm seeing some astrologers who are predicting the downfall of Trump. They're pinning their hopes on this planet Rahu. So what's going on here is the south node of the moon is creeping up on Pluto right here, and what that can do is that can bring up some like hidden secrets. So what Rahu tends to do when it gets conjunct Pluto is Pluto's kind of like the underworld, and Rahu's the north node of the moon. So I think this is going to really activate Donald Trump really going after the deep state, because Pluto actually rules the deep state, and the deep state Pluto is, so the deep state I think is ruled by Scorpio. And Scorpio, its new rulers Pluto, even though in the Vedic system it's considered Mars. So he's got this Rahu coming up there. So let's keep an eye on what he does with the FBI. Then after that, this is going to be creeping in on his Venus and Saturn. Venus, this could be kind of difficult for relationships. Saturn, this can actually be frustrating. So when Rahu gets conjunct Saturn, it's like Rahu's passion, move, move, move. Saturn is like restriction. Nope, can't do it, not going anywhere. Let's see. The other thing that we want to take a look at is his Jupiter. So Jupiter is, let's see, where's Jupiter? Okay, so Jupiter right now is in the sign of Libra. And for Donald Trump, I believe Libra is the, let's take a look here. Libra. Okay. So he actually doesn't have anything in the sign of Libra. So doesn't look like there's anything I should say major going on right there. The other thing that he had going on was Trump is actually in the middle of his Sade Sate. So if we find his moon, you'll actually see that the planet Saturn is very close to his moon. So here we have, let's see, I'm trying to find where this is here. Sorry, let's see. Well, anyway, Donald Trump is going through his Sade Sade. Here it is. So this is where it was a little while ago, and Donald Trump was born very close to a lunar eclipse. So as you can see, Saturn and Mars and all these planetary energies just passed over his moon. Now I was going to think usually a Sade Sate is very difficult, especially for somebody that has a Scorpio moon. Actually, the moon is very it's a very difficult placement for Donald Trump with the moon in Scorpio, and then also too you have the South Node conjunct it, but that's also extremely spiritual as well. So, but see the thing is, the Saturn transit didn't really seem to knock him out of commission. So that is why I think that going here on out, Donald Trump is not going to be impeached. Still a possibility of assassination. Not quite sure on the timing of that, but his midheaven is conjunct the fixed star Algol, and Algol is the head of Medusa. And so, if you think about it's basically it represents Perseus holding the head of Medusa, and when you see that, it's typically associated with beheadings and executions, but it can also be associated with people losing their mind. So you can kind of take with that from that what you will. So, all right, that is all I had today. So if you have any ideas or comments, go ahead and contact me at the links below. Otherwise, like and subscribe, and hopefully I will see you tomorrow.